Hi there, thanks very much for having us. I'm John Isbell from Netcraft. We're an internet services company based in Bath, in case you haven't heard of us. We do internet research and internet security. You might have heard of us if you used to read Slashdot, Netcraft confirms it, FreeBSD is dying, that kind of thing. So for anybody who's not aware, which I'm sure most of you are, phishing is the method of acquiring private or personal information from someone, any user on the internet. And that information is usually acquired by deceiving the user into thinking that they're communicating with some trusted entity. And phishing is something that is quite a widespread problem, probably because the level to entry is quite low. It's very easy for anybody in an Eastern European country or maybe in Africa to get on the internet and set up a web page, run a shell script, and upload a phishing site. And there's lots of debate about how much impact phishing has. I'm sure Richard Clayton probably has his own opinions on how much impact it has. There are figures as low as 35 million, and there's other people that would suggest it's more like £500 million a year in the UK. But that's probably a controversial thing to say. So, whereabouts is the clock? Okay, excellent. So as you can see here, this is two different pages. This is the official PayPal website on the right and the phishing site on the left. And if you look at them, there's probably almost no perceivable difference unless you're a technical user. And the only real difference is, which unfortunately you can't see, is the fact that the URL is not paypal.com, and that the certificate, it's not using an SSL certificate, and it's not using an EV certificate, so there's no green bar on the side. And they're in different countries, yes. So phishing sites come in all shapes and manners, and some of the different kind of things that we've seen, they range from the absolutely completely unsophisticated website that's asking you for it's just asking you for a whole list of things that you'd never normally expect to have on your online banking website, or they may be almost identical to the website like this. And then the other kind of thing that we see quite a lot is we'll see phishing sites that use typoed domain names. So they might register PayPal with an L or with some additional numbers on the end. And with the introduction of the new gTLDs, there's a whole opportunity for typoed phishing sites that we're starting to see. So phishing is always evolving, and I really hope that obviously we're from a different kind of sphere. Obviously security overlaps with what you are doing quite a lot, but I hope that as I'm talking, there's some things that you can take hold of and use. So some of the more interesting things that we've seen recently in this phishing sphere is we've seen phishing sites that are actually hosted by URL shorteners. So the phishing site doesn't exist in a traditional sense on a hacked web server. So what happens is they just take the web content and they just base64 it and stick it in a data URI and then go to tinyurl.com and and then they have a phishing site that's hosted on the URL shortener, and that makes it quite difficult to explain to the hosting company to take it down. And then the other really interesting thing about these phishing sites is the form then has a form handler that points to maybe just like a free mailer service that sends it off to the third party, to the phisher. So again, that's another thing that needs to be taken down. So another kind of unusual phishing attack that we've been seeing in the last couple of years is where the phishing site, again, doesn't exist on the internet at all, and instead it's a HTML attachment that comes with the email. You click the attachment, it opens up in the web browser, and then the form action for the phishing site redirects to a third-party service again, a form mail service, and then that form mail service will collect the details, pass it on to the phisher, and then it will redirect to the legitimate bank's website. And to the victim, it looks like that they've just typed in the password wrong on their banking site. So they're none the wiser. And then from the security company's perspective and from the hosting company's perspective, they can't see that this website is really phishing because all it does is redirect to the official bank's website. So it's not necessarily suspect. It's doing something that's perfectly reasonable to redirect to another website. So we've been working with SIDN for a number of years, and more recently we've been working with them slightly closer. So SIDN is the registry for .nl. It's one of the larger registries, and they have 5.5 million registered domain 5.5 million registered domain names, which makes them the fourth largest ccTLD behind Germany, China, and the UK. And SIDN recently conducted some interesting research where they found that 90% of the users, 90% of Dutch internet, so Dutch internet users, when they're visiting the internet and they're browsing, their behavior and their activity was basically mostly focused around visiting .com and .nl sites. So 90% of the time, those would be the websites that they were visiting. And this is quite interesting. One reason for this might be the fact that there's not many people that speak Dutch outside of Holland, but perhaps some people from right might be able to chime in on that too. But what that gives us a really unique opportunity is if we're able to tackle phishing within .nl, then we can then protect a large amount of the internet community in Holland, because those are the sites that they visit most often. So at the end of 2014, we started this pilot program with SIDN, where basically we sent out messages to all the site operators, webmasters, and DNS providers that were hosting phishing sites. And through this program called abuse204.nl. Don't try and visit it because it doesn't resolve, but it stands for abuse204.nl. So the idea behind the project was that basically we would automatically contact the upstream provider, the webmaster, and the registrar, and let them know that they were hosting either malware or phishing. And obviously, I don't know, that was quite a mammoth task, and we were a little bit nervous about how all the different hosting companies were going to respond to that. I'm sure you get sort of thousands of abuse emails every single day, so you can imagine our hesitance at doing that. So yeah, so we basically were sending out emails to everybody, but there were lots of questions that we needed to think about: how we were going to choose, who we were going to choose to contact, how we were going to obtain that information about who we were going to contact. So, I mean, one of the things that we utilize quite a lot is whois records for domain names, and then also, obviously, we need to look up who owns the network as well. So it's been really helpful, obviously, that information is all the IP addresses got good contact information. And then once the attack's actually been taken down, we need to be able to monitor it to ensure that it remains down. And so one thing that phishers often do is when they set up the phishing site, they may only make it available from a specific location. So they'll block off access to the phishing site to say only the limited company. So if the phishing site was targeting, say, HSBC in the UK, then they would only allow users who are in the UK to access that phishing site. So if you're a hosting company and there's a phish on your network, and you try and access the phishing site to take it down, then you might find, it might appear to you that the phishing site doesn't exist because they can't actually access it. So these are the kind of tricks that phishers are using that makes it sort of like a bit harder to take down the sites. So we made quite a few different interesting observations whilst we've been running this project. One of them that's probably, I guess, a little bit obvious is the fact that Dutch phishing companies were more likely to be phished in .nl. So as you can see from this table, ABN, which is a bank, and ING and Rabo, those are all banks. Within .nl, those sites were targeted much more frequently. So, and then Marketplace is a bit like a sort of like a Gumtree, eBay kind of site. And so you can see that within .nl, I mean, there was just the amount of times that those companies were targeted was so much higher. So it's quite a helpful thing for us to be doing. Another interesting observation that we made, which I guess is kind of obvious, is that there were a lot more Dutch-speaking phishing attacks in .nl. Some other interesting things that we noticed were that in .nl, there seemed to be a much higher percentage of WordPress, hacked WordPress sites compared to other TLDs. So for example, I think we had something like 20% of phishing sites within .nl were due to a hacked WordPress site, whereas globally we see it more to be like 8%. So as we started sending out these emails, we obviously got lots of feedback from network operators about how annoying we were and what we could do to improve our communication, and maybe you guys might have some feedback as well about what the best way to communicate and relay abuse, because I know that you'll get thousands of those kind of messages every single day. One thing that we received a lot of feedback from was the ability to have XRF reports, so that which is basically I presume everyone knows what XRF is, but basically it's a machine-readable way of saying this is what the abuse was, and so then at the other end, at the hosting company end, that can be automatically passed. That can be automatically passed, and then it can be routed to the right network operator or whoever needs to deal with that problem. And another thing that we found is that everybody is so busy that they don't have time to go and research what the actual problem is. They just want to get to the exact cause of the problem and shut it down as quickly as possible. So we, in our emails, we started sending out the exact location of the malware. So then the network operator or the webmaster was able to spend a lot less time resolving the problem. So the result was, we were quite apprehensive about how it was going to work, but the result was that we found, we've now found, after running this since December, so for just over a year, we found that 80% of phishing attacks are now in .nl are now going down within the first 24 hours. And the median final outage, which is basically the time that the site last responds to HTTP, we don't get a 404, is 4.7 hours, which is quite an outstanding result, the fact that we've been able to collaborate with all the different hosting companies and network providers, because previously when we measured the median outage time for phishing sites in .nl, in October 2013, it was 13 hours. And then some measurements taken by the APWG in 2014 suggested that it was 10 hours. So we've managed to basically half the median lifetime of phishing sites. Another interesting aspect of monitoring .nl and taking down all the phishing sites there is we've observed a lot of typo-squatted host names. You can see here that there are domains that have got like extra characters in, or just slightly typoed. And this is a problem that we see amongst all different TLDs, and you can see here that there are a bunch of other ones that have been slightly typoed. And I thought I'd draw your attention to the one at the bottom, nationalrailco.uk. I noticed we've had a few discussions about that on the IRC today. And that site's not actually a phishing site, but it is a scam. So basically, when you visit that website, it's a affiliate. It's basically affiliate for National Rail, and then obviously someone's creaming some money. And there seem to be a whole bunch of really interesting domains like that registered. If you go do a DNS lookup for the top 100 gov.uk domains or the top 100 ac.uk domains and do an MX lookup, they're all pointing at some specific MX records. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there, but there's definitely someone that's getting a lot of typoed email. So one of the requirements for new gTLDs by ICANN in the base registry agreement is that they monitor for phishing and malware, but they don't actually take any action on it. And that's what's one of the cool things about what .NL's done, because they've kind of gone a little bit above and beyond. So far, there's been 850 new gTLDs, and so what we found is we run something called the Web Server Survey, and for our survey, we don't measure the number of domains that are registered. We measure the number that are actually responding to HTTP, so are in active use. And we found that now apparently 3% of all domains are 3% of all domains that respond to HTTP, so in our survey, are actually new gTLDs. And .xyz is the most popular. It's now the 20th largest TLD, which is quite impressive, considering it's been only active for less than a year. And another thing that we've observed is that new gTLDs are absolutely ideal for hosting phishing sites because you can make all these amazing host names like PayPal Account Verification Center and PayPal International Support that sound really, really legitimate. And one thing that's quite interesting is because there are so many promotional offers, so you can buy them for like 99 cents. I think OVH was giving away their .ovh domain name entirely for free. We found that something like 50% of the phishing sites that we've seen in those new gTLDs are actually specifically registered for phishing. They're not websites that have been hacked. I mean, it could also be that they're new domains, but I think it says something quite a lot. You know, they're perfect for phishing, and the cheap price as well. So about a third of the new TLDs, so 261, have had phishing attacks in them. So just really quickly, if you're, I know that you guys like tools, so we have a couple of tools that you might find useful in your everyday work. We have something called the Netcraft Extension, which if you go to the Chrome store or whichever browser that you use, you can download it. It will tell you if there's a phishing site, and also give you a bit of stats, background stats about the website. And then another tool we have is a site report, and that gives you lots of information about the website. So the hosting history, which IP addresses have been on recently, lots of in-depth information about the SSL certificate. Has it been revocated? What was the status when Heartbleed occurred? Is it still using the same key? And then which web trackers, which web technologies it's using, so just like here. And then we also have something called Search DNS, which takes lots of host names from our web server survey and from the toolbar extension, and you can basically search for a keyword and you can find all the host names that match that, which might be useful if you're doing any kind of security research. So just to summarize, we've run this pilot with SIDN. It's been surprisingly effective, and thank you so much for anybody who has responded to one of our emails. And yeah, thank you very much.